Hi, everyone. It's Natasha Trenev, and I'm so honored and so pleased to introduce Savannah, who is a medical nutritionist, and she's also a gut expert. And she and I are mostly aligned on our views on gut health. And so I thought we would have a very in depth, explanatory conversation on what gluten sensitivity really is and what is celiac disease. So, Savannah, if you want to put in a few words before we dive deep in.
Yes, yes. First, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. I love having these conversations. I always think I could talk to you for hours. But I'm really excited to talk about this just because I personally have celiac disease. So it hits close to home, but I think it very much applies to everybody. And there's so many great questions that we have to answer. So let's just jump right in.
Good, good. So, I think what most people don't understand that your body was designed to protect you from microorganisms that you ingest with your food, with your water, with your air. And most people are not aware of these background microorganisms. And your stomach was designed for two things: to digest protein and also to kill bacteria. Now, bacteria is almost 98% proteins. So that's why it's important for the stomach to do that double function. So when there is a protein that's allowed to enter the GI tract that the immune system perceives to be not exactly what is deemed to be a nutrient, it starts reacting. In other words, if you took a photograph of your iris of your eye, it's a specific, identification code that goes in to identify you as having that particular iris in your eye, correct? Well, the immune system, to a certain extent, has the same prerogative that it will not allow certain proteins to enter the body and will start destroying tissue, because that's what it does when it sees that there's something defective on the lining of the intestinal wall. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the whole point is for the body to be nourished and the immune system to protect you of microorganisms who will damage the parking spaces, or I call them attachment sites, on your intestinal wall, and for the immune system to perceive what's coming across that intestinal wall is truly a nutrient to sustain your body and your health. So, what happened with gluten? Well, for those of you who may not be informed, in the 50s and the 60s, we hybridized the wheat in America, and that changed its composition. Gluten happens to be the protein part of the wheat. As remember, and I told you that proteins are what the immune system gets upset about. So now you've changed that ID from that, but it wasn't severe enough. There were some in the 1980s, there were some cases of which we didn't even have a name then, of gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. And it was so new. We all, in our quest for helping people with gut issues, were trying to decide what in the heck that was. So fast forward. So then what happened after the hybridization? We also went into GMO. So we've completely changed and adulterated the molecular typing of the protein molecule found in wheat. We furthermore use gluten in the food technology circles to as a protein extender for all fast foods, or wherever they wanted to make the source of protein cheaper, they would add gluten. So now you have a massive amount of this molecule that's been changed intrinsically, entering your small intestine, and your immune system is saying, wait a minute, this is not what we can accept. So we got to start destroying the sites around this, because we know it's going to damage the body. So what the immune system does is damages particular parts of the body in order to save the whole. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's exactly what happens. So gluten sensitivity will manifest where you're having problems with digestion, you're getting some pain when you're digesting this, and then it manifests to full-blown inability to sustain your body, because you have to build 10 million new proteins every minute in order to change this body every year, which is about 50 trillion cells. And so now your immune system, if it's not quieted down when you have a gluten sensitivity, it will become a disease. A disease means that it's now gone into its most destructive state. And that's why you're in a lot of pain, and that's why you're in a lot of ulceration. And basically, the same thing happens with ulcerative colitis, with Crohn's disease, only it's different triggers. So that's about as simply as I can explain it, what's happening with the gluten. And, what's really annoying to a lot of people when they go to France and Italy and they say, gosh, I was able to have bread and pizza. Well, because in Europe, they haven't hybridized the wheat, let alone allowed it to be GMO'd. So you have a wheat that's more natural and is not going to cause the immune system to overreact. And so here's the problem in our country that pretty soon, a friend of mine joked a couple of years ago, it's not a very savory joke, but he said, we're going to get to the point where our body will not be able to tolerate any nutrition because of the adulteration of our food. And furthermore, people are ingesting new substances that the so-called health food industry is promoting, like coconut milk, like almond milk. And I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying they are still processed foods. They're not in their normal, natural state. I mean, if you chopped open a coconut and just drank the juice, that what I would call, is a coconut water. Okay. That's the real thing. Anytime you add something to it, adulterate it, it's not in its natural state. So we are now consuming many more foods that our immune system has not developed a tolerance because the way it IDs it. So on top of the general foods causing us problems, because believe it or not, wheat and milk is a staple in many cultures that were very healthy. And the fact that we did consume wheat and milk and beef in the 50s, we had far fewer chronic diseases than we do now. So you see, that's where you have to do that in-depth dive. You can't just take, it's my favorite analogy, the 26 blind men feeling the elephant and telling the world then what the elephant looks like, right? And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you pointed out that time in history too, because I often think about, the nuclear family and when things started to change with nutrition, and it was, very much marketed, and things were marketed as good for you, as were cigarettes at one point, right? So
Yep.
the thing what is too that I think when people are going down this path is to give themselves a little grace as well, because things are marketed very well to, say how great they are for you. And that's the point of these types of conversations, is to educate and to bring to light what you can truly do to make yourself feel better. And that starts internally for all things. So
right. And so serendipitously, several years ago, I did not one, but two celiac disease trials with one of the 5 top experts in the world, the gastroenterologist who was at one point the head of the World Gastroenterology Organization. And we showed that using our LifeStar 2, which is my Bifidobacterium infantis grown in goat's milk, as a way to quiet down the reaction and to mitigate that, sometimes people cheat, go off their diet, or they have bad days. And the reason I think this organism works, and you have to really get the right organism, is that it's the one that a healthy mother passes on to the child, and then breast milk stimulates the growth of this organism. And why this is important, because that organism teaches the immune system to not overreact when food molecules are coming across the intestinal wall. I don't think people understand how important that is, because it's one of the few organisms in the microbial world that can actually downregulate the immune system without hurting the body, because then it allows the immune system to act properly if there's a threat to the health of the body. See?
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that when this conversation starts to arise, that we're not just talking about the gut itself, we're very much talking about the immune system and how much the food is truly triggering and creating this immune response.
Right. All autoimmune disease starts in the gut, and I'll break it down for you. It's either a microbe that's producing toxins that are causing damage. For instance, there was an article, which I haven't had a chance to take an in-depth look, but is talking about the fact that a food poisoning organism called a Clostridium perfringens produces a toxin that actually wipes out the myelin sheathing of the neurons. And actually, that's what causes multiple sclerosis.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
And most medical doctors are not taught this, that it's the toxins. And when the immune system perceives something not to be normal, that's when it starts destroying that area in the GI tract in the hope that it protects the body from danger. And when that cycle is taken to a level where it becomes bad for the individual, you're not being killed immediately, but you're being killed slowly because now your immune system is out of kilter and doing as much harm as it is good.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. Devastating, but interesting. I was actually doing some research and listening to a neurophysiologist speak about Alzheimer's, which I know is a little bit off topic for us, but still very pertinent, which Alzheimer's is also now referred to as type 3 diabetes, which I think is very important to point out here. But she was really noting the fact that Alzheimer's truly starts in the body 20 years before you start to get symptoms.
Right.
And that just blew my mind. Obviously, I love the connection between the brain and the gut myself, but what these long-term effects are is it's starting way before you're starting to see symptoms of
Oh,
these things.
absolutely. You're absolutely correct. It depending on the disease, it has a starting point which you're not even aware of. By the way, the reason they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes is because it's caused by a fungal overgrowth. Now we have literature saying that Alzheimer's caused, and by the way, most diseases are caused by a fungal overgrowth, which nobody talks about anymore. 30, 40 years ago was a big topic.
Mhm.
People talked about it. And now it's sort of been swept aside, and people are consuming yeasts in large quantity without knowing that in our country, we still have that fungal overgrowth problem. And fungal overgrowth is one of the major causes of Alzheimer's, not the only cause. But see what happens with Alzheimer's, without getting too technical, because I don't want to lose anybody, is that the neurons start being malformed in the proteins. The neurons do have bacteria inside of them. And the proteins, they're sometimes called amyloids. They're what I call cheap proteins. They're proteins that are not formed well, and they now start causing a problem because they're not replacing the proteins that are lost every minute of the day. They are creating proteins which now cause a problem because they're not building the body back the way it should be, but that section is being obstructed because the proteins are not good.
Exactly. And I think I could go on all day about that. We'll have to have another conversation about the connection between the brain and the gut too. But if it's okay with you, I have a ton of questions from some of my community who was interested in celiac and gluten and just overall people in general. So we can
Please.
talk a little bit about what it is, how this forms. We can talk about diagnosis a bit, but I think what really came through the most was should people who are not sensitive, and I think by that they mean not having a reaction, from gluten, stay away from it. And does that even include things like, the Ezekiel bread or like sprouted grains?
Well, first of all, that's a whopper of a question. I think wheat is a staple, and as I said, you should only stay away from gluten when it's made from hybridized wheat or GMO wheat. I think one of the best, safest forms to consume wheat is like in sourdough bread that doesn't use a yeast culture but uses a lactobacillus culture to make it sour. So you have no yeast to make that bread the way it is, and try that. And what I tell people, try it in small amounts. I always tell people, don't eat bread, raw, just toast it. take down a lot of the stuff that makes it difficult for the body to recognize and digest the wheat. Because I have to tell you that wheat is also a great component to create real bulk without irritating the lining of the gut when it's not that when it doesn't have that gluten that the immune system says, wait a minute, this is a foreigner. We got to, destroy this one. So yes, I think we definitely need, because people in Europe are still consuming wheat products and they're not sick. So the fact that we're excluding it from our diet, you're now excluding it from your body, but that's one of the staples in our society, and I don't think overall it's a good thing.
I agree. I'm always so exactly what you said, how people go to Europe and they can eat it and be fine and not have any symptoms. When I went through the whole diagnosis process, got the confirmed celiac diagnosis, I'm still so tempted to try it, even though I don't obviously want to get sick because of everything that you're talking about, how things are processed in America. And I'm just wondering, if my body would actually be okay. And is the testing, truly looking at an immune system from this protein within wheat, or is it more how much we're modifying this within the United States, and would I be okay somewhere else?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I always tell people, when in doubt, have a very small amount.
Mm-hmm.
Have a very small amount and see if it triggers anything. Like, instead of having a whole piece of bread, have a half a piece of bread,
Mm-hmm.
and see if that does something to you by the next day. Because if something's causing you harm and you want to see if you can retrain your body to accept it, then you do it in small quantities and see if you have a reaction. And if you have a reaction, it's not going to be horrible because you've taken so small an amount of it.
Absolutely. And there's a very big difference here in talking about true fermented like sourdough bread and going to McDonald's and eating a burger with a bun on it. So it's really about the quality of the food that you're eating, as is everything else that we talk about. So I just want to specify that for people as well who are
Yeah.
wanting to taste and try something and seeing how your body responds to it.
Yeah. And I think it's also, there's a danger in everybody quitting to eat gluten.
Yes.
And I also say, if you want to really be healthy, cross out fast foods out of your mind and out of your trail. Your car should never be headed in that direction, or your feet.
I agree. I know it's tempting. It's very easy in the moment, but as we previously said, I mean, what you're doing now will impact, your entire life and what your longevity looks like. So,
Yeah.
but that's something that I like to work on as well. Is if somebody is not having any type of response to gluten at all, you should not remove that wheat from your diet. You need sources of whole grains for somebody who can truly digest it. It's just about the proper forms of it that can be beneficial to your health as well. But
Yeah. And I tell people, don't take the whole grain bread. I think there's a lot of people walking back previous recommendations. We know that people who are sensitive do react to, possibly that irritating your intestinal lining when you eat the whole wheat. So I say eat organic wheat. It can be white, but have it organic wheat that's not processed. There is natural white wheat, by the way, in case, because we do have it in Eastern Europe, because our breads are not white like Wonder Bread, but they're sort of like a creamy white. They're natural. And when you have that bread, it actually has weight. It's a heavy bread. So that's what I'm saying, that we need to really educate people on which cultures have healthy food and what has been historically taught. I think in America, the biggest problem I perceive is that because somebody else has a problem, everybody stops eating that and jumps on the wagon, whatever new is recommended. And I'll give you a perfect example. And then I do want to get to your questions before I get carried away. For years, I was decrying the fact that people were consuming way too much soy milk. And people used to say, oh, you're just extreme, blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen, I always go back to the culture and see what they're consuming in that culture. In that culture, they're not consuming more than 6 to 8 ounces of this a week, not a pint or a quart every day. They're consuming a very small amount. They must have observed something culturally to make them stop drinking this on a daily basis. And we're just jumping in full force and adopting this as a staple in our diet without having any kind of information. It's the same thing when people say you should get off all fats. I was fighting that too. And I said, how are you going to feed your brain?
Right.
The fats are not the problem.
Right. I think this is going to be a loaded question, and then we will get back on topic, I promise.
Yeah.
But I have a question about this because I've seen both sides of the research and learned about it in my education, but the way that it's perceived is GMOs are needed because how else are we going to feed the entire population of people? Because that's what creates more mass amounts of foods, is what I'm understanding from that. But what do people do when, the cheap regular bread is only $1 for a loaf of it, and this good source of organic sourdough is $6-7? And I think that's the battle for a lot of people, is I might be able to try to eat a little bit healthier, fuel my gut and my brain and my body if it was a little bit more affordable. So what's the stance on GMOs there, and even just simple tips for how to incorporate easy things, even if it's a little bit more expensive?
Okay, so I'm going to make a very controversial statement. I think there's absolutely no truth that we need GMOs to sustain the food for the population, because, by the way, the population is in decline. Our birth rate in the United States of America is at 1.6. We're not even replacing ourselves.
Yeah.
So this business, we could do another show on this, is completely not true. There's more than enough food to feed the people. You don't have to give them garbage. It's just about, like for instance, they're shutting farms here in California. That's another topic. So of course, if you create a shortage, there's not going to be enough.
Right.
So no, I believe firmly that there's enough food. And if you can't afford, the organic bread, get yourself a big bags of basmati rice. We used to do this in the old country. Get lentils, get beans. The staple in Eastern Europe is, what I call chunky bean soups.
Mm-hmm.
People actually live on that. There's, if you make food, there's a lot of foods you can make from scratch and keep refrigerated for one day. I tell people don't do it for 3 days, but cook every second day, make something that'll fill you up, that's nutritious. Look at people who are healthy eating those foods and eat that. And if you find something that's not expensive and you can't afford it, then don't go back to eating the McDonald's bread, because you should ask your question. What's in the McDonald's bread? I've heard stories and I've seen data that shows that those hamburgers don't go back for bad for over a year.
Yeah.
So what's in that food? Can you imagine your body and your immune system going, oh my God, what the heck is this?
Right. And just to throw something fun in here, today I made in my Instant Pot like a lentil veggie soup, a whole thing of lentils, a bunch of vegetables, some good bone broth, and it'll probably last me for the next 2 days, and it was under $10. So
Yep.
there are ways to make things. It's just about doing a little bit of research and finding that out. So
Yeah.
more than just, the cost behind food, just take a little bit of extra time to research what you can do, because to be honest with you, a McDonald's meal in and of itself is probably more than $10. So just
Oh
looking
yeah, I heard a Happy Meal here. Not that I knew. I mean, I can put my hand up and swear I have never had any food from McDonald's in my entire life.
Yeah.
Never. I had a coffee once to be polite, but that's the extent of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I walk in and I can't stand the smell. I have to walk out.
Yeah.
And this is the God's truth. So yeah, you can make cheaper foods. Look, the whole Asian continent is sustained on rice.
Yes.
Get natural basmati rice, not expensive. And if the lentil soup that you so nicely said with the vegetables, and it's always good to saute your vegetables
Yep.
before you throw it in the soup, get the bone broth, you have a wonderful meal,
And
and it's not expensive.
right.
You don't have to be spending 20 bucks a night for dinner, because now the Happy Meal is, at least in California, it's about $17.
Yeah, it's very expensive. So
Yeah,
it's
they're
all
not cheap anymore.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everyone, let's pull this back. We're very passionate about this. Okay, let's talk about, which we kind of touched on this a little bit, but a lot of people asked how to know if a product is truly gluten free.
You can't, because unfortunately, the regulators are not really checking. Just
Right.
because, unfortunately, because I've sat on standards committees for 10 years, and unfortunately, truth in labeling is a very hot topic with me, because I've seen the misrepresentations, and there's really no agency, local, statewide, or national, that's checking these things. They can check, by touring the plant, seeing if it matches the label, but there's far and few between checks as to what's there. So basically, you have to sort of interview the supplier or the manufacturer. And I think the best way to do it is through social media and say, hey, I've tried this and it really didn't do me any good. And, then write to the manufacturer and say, hey, look, do you have anything in your product that I should be concerned about? And once they answer in writing, now they become liable.
Mm. I would love to have a full conversation about this actually with you another time, because I was just talking about our previous conversation with somebody, and talking about your experience in supplements. And that in of itself is just another pharmaceutical, whole branch essentially. I mean, they make just as much money, but a lot of them don't actually stand firm to what they claim is in their product. And that is so important to health too, because people go from not wanting to be on medications to spending hundreds of dollars on supplements that may not even be, doing what they're claiming that they're going to be doing. So that is fascinating to me, and something that I think everybody should know more about.
Right. And just as a teaser, I can tell you, doctors are not formulators. You can read all the research, but I call that horizontal knowledge. You got to have vertical knowledge to know how that product needs to be put together so that the amount of ingredients your body can recognize and actually utilize.
Right.
And that's one thing I learned when I sat on my standards committee. I'm not an expert in formulating vitamins. I don't claim to be, but I know other people who have, and it takes a lot of knowledge to make sure that you have the proper amount of each one of those nutrients, that they won't cancel each other out. And it's in a form that the body can recognize and utilize.
And I think a major theme of everything that we're talking about here always goes back to eating true whole foods and good
Right.
sources of organic lean meats, and questioning things. I mean, I think that the number one thing I always say about all of my education combined, which ranges from true like science and neuroscience to nutrition, is it taught me how to question everything. And I think that was a very valuable thing that I learned at my younger age, is because I started to question everything, not to just believe a label, and to truly see and be intuitive with your body and how something makes you feel. If you're feeling not well all the time, it's not normal. It's common these
Mhm.
days, unfortunately, but it's not normal. So you have to question what it is that you can work on in those areas.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you another problem is that people don't understand how things are made. And that's why I say one of the questions you can ask your manufacturer, is that product actually produced in a plant that you own?
Mm.
Do you have a technical manager that reviews your formulation? And do you do any testing
Right.
after you bottle that product to make sure that the ingredient you're stating on your label is actually in there?
Right.
Those are, some questions, because now when they put it in writing, they have a further legal obligation to be truthful.
And that's fascinating. I think a lot of people wouldn't even think to that was something that they could do, is
Well,
truly.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you should do it, because what happened years ago, in order to preserve themselves, supplement manufacturers all went to contract manufacturing plants, because they knew that if the FDA took their product off the market, whether they were guilty or not guilty, which was a 50-50 situation, they wouldn't lose their whole business, and they can just, change offices, but they would still have the same manufacturing facility. And that's okay. And I tell people, a lot of these doctors that do private labels, I said to them, do you ever go at least once a year to sit down with a technical director and review the ingredients in the product that you're selling to your patients. And not one of them has said yes.
Wow. Wow, that is absolutely frustrating.
I know.
Okay, I did have a couple of good questions about how to know when you may or may not have a true gluten sensitivity, or maybe having an immune response to gluten, and also if what is the main symptoms essentially that you can look for. What are the main symptoms that you can look for to start to determine? Because some people have expressed to me as well that I never really have an issue like with going to the bathroom or like even feeling constipated or any of that.
Mhm.
But we have to start talking about these things of fatigue and all of these other symptoms as well. So we want to touch on
Yeah.
how to know when you have a true sensitivity, but also what's the fine line between the sensitivity and an allergy.
Well, okay, those are loaded questions. But what I'm saying to people, it's a number of symptoms, and it all depends on the individual and how it's affecting your immune response. So you can feel cramping, uneasiness, fatigue, headache, irritability because you're not feeling good, sometimes cramping, which is very unpleasant. Depends on how your body is reacting and the amount of gluten you've ingested. And so what I tell people in the old days, what that happened, what you would do is eliminate that food from your diet for 72 hours. If you don't have the money for expensive blood tests, this works. And then after 72 hours, introduce a small amount of that food back into your diet and see how you react.
See how your body responds. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly how I started playing around with it myself. And I have a long family list of people who actually have celiac. And so I always kind of knew I had at least a sensitivity. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I truly knew that it was an allergy, and got the confirmed diagnosis. And I think that it made me feel a lot better, but it made me question a lot of other areas of my life as well. And also, number one, realizing how a lot of the symptoms that we're experiencing, yes, 100%, the food that we're eating, consuming, not sleeping properly, hydrating, getting outside, with Mother Nature, all of that. But a lot of the symptoms that we feel can very much be related to food sensitivities, not just gluten, but a lot of people don't
Anything.
recognize how these symptoms can be related to your body responding negatively to any type of allergen that might be. So even your pets, unfortunately, some people don't recognize how that can impact them too. So that's one thing I really, really want to urge people to consider is when you're feeling really bad, especially if you've been putting in the effort to eat healthier, to try to get your body moving, start to wonder, okay, is there a genetic component there as well, that there's these history of allergens and allergic reactions to certain foods in my family, or let me play around here a little bit. And a lot of this is experimenting, especially like you said, if you don't have the money for these tests, but it can be fun if you try to make it fun to try to figure out what it is.
Well, okay, so let's break this down. First of all, the genes are passed, but they're only plans. The plans don't get activated until your perception of reality becomes the same as maybe the parent who's passing on the gene. Your ingestion of toxins from the environment or bacteria that you have inside that you inherited from both parents are producing toxins. Those are the only three things that can trigger or activate a gene.
So that's along the lines of like epigenetics, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is epigenetics. I mean, that's well documented now that many people who have a genetic predisposition are not born with disease. They have a possibility because that's how their ancestors survived. But the fact that I would say for the last 4 generations, the quality of the microbiota that constitute the microbiome that's passed on both by the father and the mother to the newborn is what's changed radically. And that's why we're exploding with these chronic diseases and problems everywhere. And everybody's put them in little cubicles when in actuality, the Alzheimer's is related to celiac disease. The celiac disease is related to multiple sclerosis. It's just a different manifestation of the immune system trying to destroy defective cells that feel would hurt the survival of the body.
Right. And I don't know the statistic offhand, but I do know that when you are diagnosed with one autoimmune condition, you are so much more likely to be diagnosed with another because it is also connected, like you're saying.
Right. And also, what I want to mention today is that people who have gluten sensitivity and celiac disease should definitely go off alcohol. So, whatever is causing, remember, alcohol makes things much more bioavailable. Okay. So, if you're ingesting something with that wine or that alcoholic beverage, you are now making it much more worse because it's now being absorbed much more efficiently, besides then causing a problem to your liver to produce the enzyme when your body's already compromised.
Wow. Yeah, I think that is one thing that I see a lot is people nervous about giving up alcohol. So I think the more reasons that we can continue to provide, you know, education behind it, that it is so much more helpful because people don't realize, I mean, it's just really a poison for your body, your gut, your brain.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's not a moral judgment anymore. Let's just face it. Alcohol is the class A carcinogen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It will trigger cancer. So, I tell people, look, I'm not here to make you feel better about it. I'm here to tell you what the truth is. And I always tell people, I don't make the rules. I'm just here to tell you that if you have a strong enough mind and perception of reality, you can overcome everything. But unless you have that, forget it. You're going to have to start, thinking differently and behaving differently.
Right. Right. I think the last question that kind of wraps this all up, combination of them, is well, I had one about cross contamination, but we kind of touched on that and kind of realizing these symptoms and if something is showing up in your body and you're having an immune response, if you're having that fatigue, any of it, that could definitely signal to you that you may have ingested something, especially if you've been diagnosed with celiac. I wanted to ask, let's say you have been exposed to something that is weed, or you may or may not have been diagnosed, but you have a sensitivity. And for some people, there's a wide range, honestly, of what kind of happens to people when this happens. But some may experience diarrhea, some may experience constipation. So a lot of the questions also relate to what happens when you are exposed to this allergen or something that you're sensitive to. What's the best thing to do to kind of get that to calm down and to have a less severe reaction?
And the only thing I can recommend is the goat's milk formula of the B. infantis. And that's not me pushing product. That's me from doing work for 56 years. That's the only bacteria that will quiet the activity, the overreaction of the immune system.
Right. And it's
pardon
that
me?
piece here that's so important.
Pardon me?
I said it's that immune piece here that's so important because
absolutely.
some people ask about enzymes and stuff, and it can be helpful to break down certain things, but it doesn't do anything in terms of the immune response.
No, the immune, enzymes have its own place. I think people categorize supplements incorrectly because, like I said, I've been in this industry for 56 years, and I've heard every story under the sun. And one of these days, I'm going to document it in my fourth book. But for now, I'm just saying you have to place the importance. Enzymes are important if you're constantly having a problem with digestion, but they're not a long-term solution. And why? Because if your body was designed to be perfect, excuse me, if it's not able to digest your food without help, you got a problem. That means something's wrong with the microbiota composition somewhere in that 27 feet, that your body is not producing the enzymes to digest your food, or you're not chewing your food adequately and you're eating food that your body, your immune system is overreacting to. Remember, the reason you feel tired when you have a food sensitivity or food allergy, it's that it's forcing the immune system to work harder and longer. And the immune system is one of the systems in our body that utilizes the most energy. Because when you're sick, what do you feel? You feel tired. You can't move because your immune system is now on the battleground. Just think about that. And your body's forcing you to rest because it's saying, hey, all the energy is now going to the immune system. I don't have energy for you to do anything else.
Absolutely. And you have to be intuitive in those moments. Listen to your body. I think so many of us these days are so disconnected from our bodies. And it's such a wild concept to me because there's so many voices coming in, whether it's from news or social media, and we're listening to outside sources instead of reflecting inwards and listening to what your body truly needs. And that's one thing that I always try to stress is listen to your gut. Like there's a reason that you're feeling these things.
Hmm. Yeah, and the thing, what's happening is that too much of what I call closed-ended information. It's information that fits in a very tiny box, but doesn't give the person the wide. So they're trying to give you quick solutions to complex issues,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why the explosion of chronic diseases. My goodness, if we're spending $4.3 trillion on our healthcare and 80% is spent on chronic disease, we haven't made any progress. In fact, we're in the hole. And if it continues, I mean, this medical system is already bankrupt. And by the time you're 50, you're taking 4 or 5, sometimes 6 medications. The medications were not designed to be used on a daily basis. That means something is radically wrong. Western medicine is for critical care. Learning how to treat your body is the long term fare.
Right.
Your body is not defective. It's what you're doing to your body that is defective.
Right. Let me ask you, sorry, one more quick question because I'm
Sure.
trying to think in the minds of people listening. Let's say, I mean, people who have kind of lived their lives in the common way, the standard American diet, not really have being truly educated on nutrition, maybe not having access to it, but they are now working to, you know, better their food, better their habits, better their routines. Whether or not they have a gluten sensitivity or allergy, is there hope for the immune system? How can the immune system recover? Does it mean that they are that they are impacted long term?
Well, the immune system will recover. And again, this is not a sales pitch. If you put the right probiotic bacteria that have evolved with Homo sapiens back into the gut, that actually have your best welfare at hand because you are the best habitat for them to thrive. So it's a matter of now, and we've been putting in a lot of questionable products, throwing in a lot of bacteria, which people just throw together as a marketing plan. And we are so compromised now that we really need help to rebuild that GI tract. That's why I'm still working. I should have been retired 10 years ago. But I realized what was coming down the pike, that we got sick mothers, we got sick children, and it's overwhelming. So, no, we have to step back and say, how do I rebuild that intestinal wall? Remember, every 3 days to 5 days, that one cell lining on the intestinal wall is changed. Every 3 months, your immune system is revitalized. So you do have the opportunity to make your body function better. You've just been sold a false notion that your body's not capable of healing itself. It is capable of healing itself, but you can't listen to the 30-second TikTok, ad and think you got it solved,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to get it solved. We have to get serious about who we're listening to, what we're going to do. And I can just say I've helped millions of people in the last 40 years. And that's why I'm staying, because I see the problem with our children. Look, let me just give you some statistics that should alarm everybody. We are still heading to 1 in 2 autistic children by 2030. It has been estimated to handle that catastrophe, it would require a $17 trillion budget. Okay. So now we're having infertility problems, fertility, and everybody said that's separated. No, everything that happens in your body, from the lack of fertility to your gut issues to your sinus issues to your bone health issues, to your hair issues, to your eye issues, everything is interconnected. It's not separate. Everything is located in the gut, as Chinese medicine tells us. Every disease that's manifested in the body, you can, with Chinese medicine, you can find a place in the GI tract that is the starting point of that problem.
And this is not a sales pitch for me either, but I will tell you, when you try a supplement that you truly know works, you will feel it. When I started taking probiotics compared to, I mean, I used to take probiotics that had 50, 75 billion CFUs, had so many things in them. There's a true difference from how I feel now to how I feel then, and it's so much better. And less is more in that regard. If you have true quality in your supplement and your probiotic, that is what matters here, in combination with these other changes that we're talking about with true whole foods.
You know what? And I want to tell you that, in the old days when all of us were dedicated to the health field, and we had a lot of people who sacrificed their welfare, their personal income, everything. I'm telling you that we have to find who the people are that are truly knowledgeable and that specialize in that field. You cannot specialize in 50 categories of dietary supplements.
No.
It's just not possible. And microbiology is probably the most complex, difficult one. So if you are in the probiotic field, you not only have to be the researcher, you have to be the formulator, you have to understand fermentation, you have to understand what the bacteria want, not what the human being wants to read on the label. It's what the bacteria are far smarter than we are. So you know what it is that they're not going to behave because somebody puts something on the label and tells you something. They behave because you stimulate them to behave, and they will implant and function in your GI tract if their criteria for thriving is met. That's their only objective in life, is that they want their own kind to thrive. And if you don't provide the way and the growth medium for them to do so, they have no interest in doing it. And that's what I think people have to understand, that not me, but our thoughts and the last 25, 30 years of stuff we've been doing, and all these food gurus, all these gut gurus, all these physicians who keep writing books and telling you that they're making supplements. And I always say to people, how does that work for you? How many people have actually gotten better and benefited? And obviously not enough, because the rate of chronic disease is increasing, not decreasing. The level of autism, learning disabilities, depression, anxiety, all of them are going up. Not one of these things are going down. So obviously something that we're doing or who we're listening to is not working for society. And we need to change who we listen to, what we adopt, and how we change our lives.
I couldn't agree more. I'm always so honored to learn from you and to speak with you. And I'm so grateful to have had this conversation as well, because it impacts so many people within my own community as well. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of that education, because it's something we both firmly agree on. It's how important that is. And I just couldn't thank you enough for having this conversation with me.
It's my pleasure. And I always say, there's nothing wrong with money. It's what you do for it and with it that becomes a problem. And that money should be a spiritual reward for doing the right thing.
Absolutely. I can agree.
And that I welcome all of your questions. So, next time, if you want to have some of your people and we can go down their question, I can help them. And trust me, there hasn't been anybody in 40 years that has listened to me that has not been helped.
I would love that. I want to connect more on skin and hair loss, and I also want to talk well, a lot of the skin stuff, but also the mental component too. That would be great conversations.
Well, great. I have a face mask, and I tell people I'm 76. I've had no injections in my skin. I have done nothing but facials, and the skin is a reflection of what's going on in your body. So if your skin doesn't look good, it means there's something wrong inside your body. A lot of young women have this like grayish tinge to their skin. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah.
And the hair loss is also related, because If you're not absorbing your nutrients, of course, your nails are going to be lousy. Your hair is going to be lousy. That means that you're malnourishing your body.
Right. It's like a clear indicator of showing what's going on within, which
Yeah.
that's always kind of when I look at my skin too, is if I do happen to catch a cold or something, like I'm like, okay, I seeing a little blemish here or there, but you know what's interesting is I was just telling my partner today actually, there's a lot of people getting sick around where we live and my family's sick again. And I'm like, I usually get sick around this time or the last couple months every year, and I haven't gotten sick at all. Minus, I had an ovarian cyst, which, by the way, thank you, because those probiotics really helped me feel better. I could feel a massive difference. But when my body is going through it, I can truly feel it and see it with how I'm presenting as well.
Wonderful. And I can tell you the reason people get sick during the holiday season is because of the change in temperature.
Mm-hmm.
When the temperature changes outside, different bacteria proliferate. So if your immune system is not up to par, it hasn't seen these new bacteria and viruses, and it becomes much more susceptible to coming down with something because your immune system is not primed to deal with it. And overeating, overindulging destroys your immune system ability to protect you. So I tell people you can't treat your body like a garbage can,
Right.
you
So
know?
you think that it's okay then for people to consider a probiotic basically an immune supporter?
Absolutely. I mean, the right probiotic. That's why I said I only chose in the Healthy Trinity the three bacteria that have evolved with Homo sapiens and that have been in the literature for well over 100 years. I
Mm-hmm.
don't fool around because microbes are very smart and they're very, dedicated to surviving and increasing their own kinds. You have to be very careful which ones you choose, how you treat them. And look, I never plan on being sick. And knock on wood, I never got COVID. I never got sick, during the thing. And that's because my outlook and the way I treat my body predisposes it to being healthy
Right.
and to keep your mind sharp, to your skin beautiful and function. Because I tell people, listen, you do not want to end up in a nursing home. What's the value of your life if you end up in a nursing home and you can't enjoy your life? Just keeping your body alive? No, you want to be vibrant. You want to be able to think clearly. You want to be able to move and enjoy your life. That's what the joy of living is, to say, wake up every day and say, thank you. I have a wonderful day and another opportunity to enjoy myself.
Right. I never got COVID either, thankfully, also knock on wood here. But it's also just so worth it. Exactly what you're saying. I mean, I truly can't think of anything worse than, let's say, your mind still being there and kind of being locked within your own body because you can't live the way you once were able to. And it's extra work, especially these days, but it's so worth it to just live a healthy, fulfilling life that you can
Um,
live along with the people that you love.
Health has no price.
No.
Because I've talked to very wealthy people. Believe me, they cannot enjoy their life if they have some severe, especially gastrointestinal problem. I've had people who had, IBS with diarrhea, who would
Mhm.
have to map out every bathroom within 5 miles wherever they were traveling.
Yeah,
And if that isn't miserable, I can't think of anything else more miserable.
truly. There's something to be said for every type of illness, without a doubt. But man, there's really nothing worse, in my opinion, at least from somebody who went through their own struggles with gut health. That's what got me into this field. There's just nothing worse than struggling with your gut and having to run to a restroom and missing out on things because you're sick and just feeling stuck in that. It's just an awful feeling.
Yeah. And I especially get worried about young women and young men, colon cancer going past as young as in the 20s and
Mhm.
in the 30s. It's unheard of. Pancreatic cancer in the 1980s was unheard of.
Yeah,
And now it's just, exploding. So we have to ask ourselves what happened here.
absolutely.
We're getting more disease, we're getting less people who are functional. And so whatever we're doing, we have to change course and we have to try something that really works. And that's why I say that's why I'm still staying, because too many people are led astray by buying a quick fix and not understanding how to work with their body, not trying to tell the body to shut up by sending it a message to shut down the immune system or to stop a certain pain, because that's not really conducive to overall health or enjoying your life.
Right. Right. I think our main points here are to always ask questions, look further into your health, listen to your gut, and really, really support your immune system. Without a
Right?
doubt.
And we're here to help you. Both
Yeah,
Savannah and I, there's a number of good people who have really dedicated their life to helping their patients, to helping their customers, and all of us at the end of the day have the ability to know the truth when we hear it.
absolutely.
And so if you've been fooled, that's what I'm saying. Listen up and let's start this rolling, because there's going to be many more challenges. And we need our young people, especially, to be healthy and ready to deal with the challenges.
Agreed. And again, it's going to be so worth it to get to that other side of it. I know it feels scary in that moment, but I think everyone should give themselves grace with wherever they're at in their journey, because we all started somewhere with it as well, and our education behind it. And you're not alone. And so many people struggle with this area of health. So you are just not alone in this.
That's right. And we're here to help you. And believe me, to me, that is the meaning part of life. That to help another person, there is no greater thrill or satisfaction that someone says, "Gosh, you really changed my life," or "I feel terrific." There's nothing in the world that can, be greater or make you feel better than to hear something like that.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of the best feelings I've ever felt. So
It is. All right. Well, listen, so hopefully we'll get together. Please get your people. I'd love to answer their questions. I'd like to help them with their protocols, because that's how we're going to help each other.
all right, I will absolutely do that. I can't wait.
Okay. So for now, we'll just say goodbye and hopefully we'll see you soon. Contact beautiful Savannah for more advice, and we're happy to help and we're working together. So we want to hear all of your positive stories, and I want to hear that you're doing better.
As do I. And thank you again for having me. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye bye now.